City and State TV. I'm Executive Editor Michael Johnson. I'm joined now by Stephen Sigmund. He is the newly appointed Executive Director of High Achievement New York. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks Michael.
So congratulations on the gig, and tell us a little bit about High Achievement New York, what you guys are doing.
Yeah, so High Achievement New York is a coalition of teachers, parents, business and civic groups who have come together to help defend and support and promote the Common Core standards in New York. Because, as you know, they've undergone some debate and some controversy, but we think they're incredibly important to the future of New York State, to the future of 2.6 million public school kids, and to, frankly, reversing an often failing system of the last decades.
And clearly, as you alluded to there, you're coming to this a little bit late in the sense that there's been a large backlash against Common Core. You're coming into it having to fight that perception. What's the approach to kind of turning public perception that Common Core is not necessarily a bad thing, which is what played out in the election cycle last year?
Right. So I think we take sort of two approaches. One is to promote the standards, right? To really put some truth on the table about the standards, because there's been a lot of myths out there and a lot of misperceptions. I think I was thinking of a couple of weeks ago, Bobby Jindal, who's the governor in Louisiana, accused the Common Core standards of potentially ending teaching of American exceptionalism in U.S. schools. Now, one, that's absurd, but two, the Common Core standards are only English language arts and math. They're not even taught in history, right? So there's a lot of that out there in the opposition to Common Core. We're here to put the facts on the table, to have a positive conversation about it among stakeholders who aren't directly necessarily part of the education community, but have a role in the importance of college and career readiness for every public school kid in New York State. So that's the positive side. On the reactive side, we are here to respond really to some of the opposition and some of the myths out there about Common Core as they're put out, and to respond quickly and through a coalition that has a public voice.
And you mentioned that coalition is a mixed group, business leaders, it's teachers, it's parents. Do you think there's a sense that the parents maybe hear other parents say bad things about Common Core, and then they just kind of, without knowing the facts, assume that maybe this is bad because they inherently trust that, or same thing, teachers trust other teachers? Is that why you wanted to have a broader coalition?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I mean, I think we see lots of different messengers as critical to ensuring that people both understand and appreciate what the Common Core standards are and aren't. Obviously the most powerful messengers are teachers who are in the classroom every day with their kids and their classes. We have groups of teachers through Educators for Excellence, through America Achieves, who are out there talking about the standards, how it's affecting them, the benefits of the standards, and even what are some of the changes to implementation that should be made in order to help them teach better. So yeah, we want to make sure that there's messengers in lots of different communities to talk about what the standards are, what they aren't, and how they can benefit New York State.
And as we talk about perception, obviously the perception of an anti-Common Core movement was really driven home by the creation of a party called Stop Common Core Party last year. A lot of politicians, tripping over themselves to just state that they were opposed to the implementation, if not, the standards themselves. How do you counteract that going forward?
Yeah. Look, I think it's important to talk about the Stop Common Core line, which now, of course, has changed and is no longer the Stop Common Core line. I mean, I think that was largely a political play by an opponent to the governor to try to draw some votes away, as opposed to being an actual debate about Common Core itself, which has been part of the problem. Part of the problem with the Common Core standards is that so much of the opposition and the debate has just been about emotion and politics. I've sat in focus groups, for example, where you see parents asked, should there be higher standards? They say yes. Is it important for kids to be college and career ready? They absolutely say yes. And then they ask them, well, what do you think of the Common Core? And they say it's bad. Right? And the Common Core is obviously those first two things that I mentioned. That's in fact what the Common Core is doing. So the words Common Core have a branding and political problem that I think that the Stop Common Core line took advantage of and sort of helped kind of try to solidify in the fall, and the fact that it's gone, and I think that you've gotten past some of that political and emotional conversation of the first couple of years of the standards in New York, means this is an important time now to have an actual, factual, focused conversation about what the standards are and what they aren't, so that parents and kids, the people who are actually the end users of the standards, can really understand them, rather than just having politicians kind of use them for their own purposes.
And a lot of times these arguments, just based on simple human nature and also media coverage, gets kind of pared down to you're either for Common Core, you're against it. You were telling me before we did the interview, there's a lot of things that you guys would want to change with Common Core as far as the implementation. Then you want to actually take an active role in listening to what teachers are telling you about what needs to get changed going forward.
Yeah, I think that's an important part of having an honest and ongoing dialogue, and ultimately implementing successful standards. Later today, after this interview, one of our groups, Educators for Excellence, is having a press conference about how some implementation recommendations that their teachers have developed around special needs students and around English language learners. Right, so there are pockets and areas that can be changed, and that can be better implemented in order to make sure the standards work and are here to stay.
Great. We talked a little bit before as well about how New York is one of the first states to go through with this, and a lot of times, it was, you get that backlash because you have those growing pains. Do you think that going forward, New York is actually in a better standing to move forward in implementing Common Core ahead of all the other states are kind of starting right now?
Yeah, I definitely do. I mean, look, I think New York had a hard road to hoe, right? Because we were among the first. And we did it all at once, right? I think smartly in the end, the chancellor and the regents and the education department and the governor got together and decided that we would start earlier, that we would develop our own assessment, statewide assessment, ahead of the PARCC and Smarter Balance tests, which you're just seeing now. And it was ripping the Band-Aid off all at once, right? And it was painful, and there was a lot of backlash to it. But you're starting to see the benefits and the results now, right? It's penetrated into the classrooms, and you see polls of teachers in New York State that 70 and 75% of them support Common Core and say the implementation is going well. 80% say it's helping their students. The test scores have gone up year over year. The first cohort of students, of high school students, to go through all 4 years of Common Core, the graduation rates went up to a new high, which we saw in December. So it's starting to work. There's a long way to go. There's still a lot of opposition to it. There's still a real need to have the kind of positive conversation that we want to have. But I think we're in a position now where, because we started so early, we can have that conversation, right, without it having just being the sort of emotional and political conversation that it was early on and that other states are seeing right now. We can have a legitimate and real conversation about it. And
the biggest, I guess, point of contention when people bring up Common Core and they get into the details is the teacher testing. The proposal the governor has put forth would be that 50% is from student performance and whether it gets better. The other 50% would be from grading teachers in the classroom, with independent reviewers there as well. Do you think that's a good plan going forward? Do you think that there could be tweaks to that plan? Do you think that there needs to be a larger conversation on on what that system is?
So we haven't taken a position on the evaluations, and nor will we, because the nature of our coalition is a broad-based coalition, and some of the groups support that change the evaluations. Some would like to see it a little bit different. What we have supported is less testing overall, right? So what we think ought to happen, New York State has done a very smart thing where they've put caps on the amount of time, instructional time, that students can be subject to for the state assessments, right? 1% on the actual tests, 2% for preparation, right? So 2% of total instructional time in the year is spent on the state assessments, which we think is a very good thing. And what we've called for is eliminating or reducing the local district assessments, which are a little inconsistent, they're a little all over the place, and just concentrating on the statewide assessments. So one, you have consistent testing. Two, you have a continual barometer of how the multiple billions that are being invested in education in New York State every year, how we're doing. And 3, you end up with less testing time overall, which has been a primary concern of parents.
And it seems like less testing is something that, even like teachers' unions and other advocates, I mean, almost everyone can agree that less testing for students is something that they want to get to. Do you think that that's a goal that can get navigated out, even though, the teachers' unions are opposed to getting rid of the district testing as far as like testing teachers in the district level because they want to have those local tests that are set up? Do you think that there maybe is a larger goal where like just the concept of less testing of students is something that we could reach in the very near future?
Look, I think overall assessments there'll be adjustments made to the assessments as you go forward with the standards. I mean, you're already seeing that happen, and I think you'll continue to see that happen. What's important for us, at least, is that, and I think what should be important to residents of the state, is that there is a consistent statewide assessment to mark how the investments in education are going, and more importantly, to catch students who are having trouble in certain areas before that becomes endemic, right? In previous decades, you lost whole generations of students who, just kind of got behind and stayed behind. If you don't have these assessments in place, if you're not tracking year by year, you're not able to kind of catch that before it becomes a continual and frankly irreversible problem. Which is why in our point of view, there's a real danger in the opt-out movement, for example, because it ends up skewing the results, right? Because depending upon who you have opting out, you don't have a real picture of how kids are doing in the state overall, and 2, if in fact you have enough kids opting out who are at the bottom of achievement, you can't really track how they're doing or catch problems early enough, right? So you can end up in a situation that we were in before, where you lose generations of kids, frankly.
And this entire debate over the future of education and how this all plays out, the selection of the new education commissioner will be a big part of that as well. And I know your organization has several things that you want to be looked at when it comes to selecting the next education commissioner. Can you go through those a little bit for us?
Yeah, look, I think we think it's important that the next commissioner stick with the standards, and we think they will, obviously. We think they need to be open to outside stakeholder groups like ours, but also, to listen to parents and have a lot of local engagement, and parents have good ideas. There are lots of parents out there who have good ideas for how the standards should be implemented, for if there are adjustments that should be made to the assessments. So we think, a combination of sort of sticking with the standards, listening to stakeholders outside of the, outside of just the education community, are 2 very important things for a next commissioner.
Great. Stephen Sigmund, thank you very much for joining us, and congratulations on your gig, and good luck at High Achievement in New York.
Thanks.